Hi, I'm sure that 90% of you have once had to deal with death of a loved one or of a friend. If not yet, one day the time will come. And although the thought is gut-wrenching and painful, there are ways to cope. As I work with grieving families on a daily basis, I see the need for acceptance and closure of death being found at funeral services. Though many find the setting to be sad and uncomfortable, it is in fact very beneficial. It is my duty as a funeral director to share why attending a funeral is valuable for the grieving loved ones that have been left behind. Whether it be for grievance and coping process of the loved ones, a time of closure and acceptance for family and friends, or purely in honor of remembrance for the deceased, the funeral service is important to help the family with processing their loved one's passing. A funeral isn't for the one that has passed away, but for the ones that have survived. A funeral gives a grieving family time to cope with the approaching changes of losing one that was so dear and grants them the initial step of separation. Attending a funeral service allows you and I, as well as our friends and families, time to show their emotion of the loss by grieving together. It gives us time to cry and to shed tears. Visitation of a service provides the time and the place for mourners to offer their expressions and sorrows of sympathy to a grieving family. A public service also enables the community to hear and to be aware of the passing, rather than the unexpected knowledge of death later. Most importantly, a funeral validates life and its significance and allows us to go on by living and to grieve and cope with the tragic loss. The fact of losing a loved one is never easy and extremely difficult to accept. People tend to cry. They even sob and wail at funerals because they force us to concentrate on the fact of death and the feelings of its reality. When someone we love dies, we must openly acknowledge the reality and the finality of death. Thankfully, having a funeral for the deceased loved ones allows us that time to say our goodbyes. When we see the deceased in the casket, it makes death real, allowing us to see the reality of it. Although death is traumatic, support from our family and friends of the community makes processing through the pain of acceptance much easier to bear. The support shown by loved ones at a funeral bestows encouragement and strength for the surviving family's ability to move on. A funeral ceremony with support of family and friends is an extensive step of closure. Funerals are most important not only because do they help with coping and closure, but a life that has lived for such a precious time deserves to be honored. When someone has died in our family, it is important to take that time to gather together and to remember the loved one. This time of remembrance also allows the family of the deceased to hear and to share memories of the loved ones that has passed. To heal and grief, we must shift our relationship with the deceased from one of physical presence to one of just a memory. A traditional service and a eulogy is usually attempted to highlight the major events in the life of the deceased and the characteristics that he or she prominently displayed. This is helpful to mourners because it tends to prompt a more intimate and individual It tends to prompt more intimate and individual memories, allowing the grieving one the ability, a bit of peace and happiness, excuse me, in such a time of despair. Although death is heartbreaking and dreadful, a funeral service is one way to manage the pain. By attending a funeral, you may be able to learn to grieve and to cope with the sorrow of the death, acquire acceptance and closure, and also honor and remember the loved ones that have passed. As a funeral director, I am more than honored to provide such a service to mourning families in their time of despair. Even though we do not know the time or the place that death will occur, we may rest easy in the knowledge that by the simple comfort of a funeral service, we are able to cope with the situation, accept the undeniable, and honor our loved one.